Hi, my name is Robert Chelle, Chelle Law, and my law firm assists physicians with employment contract issues. Today, I'm going to talk about who typically pays for tail coverage. So, in order to talk about tail coverage, we need to talk about underlying malpractice policies as well. So, we're going to hit both of those. So, first, when do you need tail coverage? So, there are three main types of insurance for physicians. If you're with a large hospital or healthcare network, they may be self-insured. And so in that scenario, you usually would not need tail insurance. If you have an occurrence-based policy, just means a policy has to be in effect when the malpractice event occurs. You do not need tail insurance for that as well. And then the third is claims made. So under a claims-made insurance policy, a policy has to be in effect when the claim is actually made. And since you could terminate your relationship with an employer, there's going to be a gap in between the date of termination and then the last day somebody can sue you. That's called the statute of limitations. And so in most states, it's 2 years. Now, 2 years from when the patient either knows or should have known of the malpractice event. So sometimes it can go past 2 years. And so a tail policy is simply coverage that covers that gap in between when you leave and then the last day somebody can sue you. So why would an employer use claims made versus occurrence? Let's just say it's a private employer. We're just going to assume hospitals are self-insured. So in this scenario, let's just talk about a private physician practice. So if they have to choose between occurrence and claims made, 9 times out of 10, they're going to choose claims made because it's cheaper. An occurrence policy is generally around a third more expensive per year for a physician. But as I said before, tail insurance is not necessary for an occurrence policy. A claims-made policy, so if it's a third cheaper than an occurrence-based policy, and the employer is going to make the physician pay for tail coverage, it's just simply cheaper for them in the long run, and that's why they do that. So kind of the premise of this video is who typically pays for tail insurance. If you are a physician who does shift work, so let's say hospitalist, ED, almost always the physician is going to pay for your tail. If you work for a hospital and let's say they're not self-insured and they just have a claims-made policy, like extremely rarely, maybe like 1 time out of 100, would the physician have to pay for tail insurance. Almost any time a physician is employed by a hospital or health network, the employer is going to pay for your tail. So if you're in private practice or an employee of a private practice, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have claims made coverage. And then I'd say probably 50% of the time, maybe a little bit above that, the physician is going to be the one that has to pay for tail. So is that fair? Well, it's just a matter of negotiation. Tail costs about twice what your annual premium is. So let's just take a primary care physician. Their annual premium's usually somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000. And so if the physician had to pay for tail, just multiply that times 2. So somewhere between 12 to 16,000, they'd have to pay for the tail coverage. That's a one-time cost. So it's not like every year you have to pay for tail. It's just a one-time fee when the contract terminates, and then you're covered for either the entire gap normally, or sometimes it's a specific period of time. And you obviously want to get a policy that goes well past the statute of limitations. So it's really specialty dependent upon whether this is a huge deal or not. If you're in primary care and you have to pay $12,000 for tail, yeah, it's probably annoying, but it's not going to be, break the bank for you. If you are an OBGYN and you have a $50,000 annual premium and you have to pay $100,000 for tail insurance, well, that's something completely different. And so negotiating who has to pay for tail could be the key point in the negotiation for an OBGYN. Maybe, and you're going to do the math on this, if you can increase your base salary by $15,000 versus negotiating the employer paying for tail, well, that's a no-brainer. You're going to get that $15,000 every year. And that's worth much more than just having a one-time, $15,000 cost for tail. So if you are going to try to negotiate who pays for the tail, obviously you need to do that prior to signing the employment agreement. So usually the employer will send the agreement, the physician will look it over. If they're smart, they'll have an attorney review it. And then we'll kind of come up with a list of things that we need either clarified or that we're going to ask for. And so in that scenario, we kind of figure out what is most important to the physician, and then, situate the counteroffer based upon that. Every situation is different. Some things are more important to a physician than others. Maybe some person or a physician absolutely needs the non-compete amended because they cannot leave the area once the contract terminates. Or maybe a bonus is most important to a physician to help them, pay for a down payment on a house. Or others in this case, if they're, as I said before, an OBGYN and they, don't want to pay $100,000 when the contract terminates, that might be the most important thing to them. Two other considerations. One, if you're with an employer and you have to pay for tail, but you move to a different employer that utilizes the same insurance company, usually that insurance company will allow you to roll over your old policy into your new one, avoiding having to pay for tail. Now, there's no way you're going to know that if when you start a job that your next job is going to have the same insurance company, but that's one way of getting out of paying for it. The other way would be having your new employer pay your old tail. That's called nose coverage. So in nose coverage, it simply would be a negotiation with your new employer that says, once the contract terminates with your current employer, they're going to pay your old tail or reimburse you for whatever you paid for it. Nose coverage doesn't happen very often, but it certainly does, and it's a possibility for a physician. So who typically pays for tail coverage? I'd say typically it's the physician, but it's not, completely out of the ordinary for a physician to provide it as well. It's really just a point of negotiation. So if you have any questions about tail coverage, you can always call my law firm at the phone number listed in the description below, or you can always reach us through our website, chellelaw.com, CHELLE law.com. Anyway, appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.